Hello and welcome to What the Tech from Boast AI, where we talk with some of the brilliant minds behind new and exciting tech initiatives to learn what it takes to tackle technological uncertainty and eventually change the world. Today, I am thrilled to welcome to the show from Silicolabs, Benjamin Alsbury-Nealy, co-founder and CEO, and Kyla Alsbury-Nealy, co-founder and chief operating officer. Benjamin and Kyla are driving some serious innovation over at Silicolabs, leveraging emerging technology to bridge the gap between neuroscience and artificial intelligence. They do this by creating tools that enable anyone to leverage tech like virtual reality, augmented reality, and AI within a framework designed for creativity and collaboration. The results? Silicolabs customers can easily create virtual experiences that simulate real-world scenarios to train and assess human and AI behavior, saving precious time and resources. It's a hot market for sure, and one steeped in research and development, and we're excited to ask Benjamin and Kyla how they got into the space in the first place, the many applications and use cases of their cutting-edge tech, and their opinion on what it takes to succeed in the current startup ecosystem. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Benjamin and Kyla.
Hi, thanks for having us. That was an awesome intro. A lot of people don't nail exactly what we do, but I think that was very good synopsis. So thanks for that.
As I was telling you earlier, our guests are our audience, so I love speaking to founders who have been in it and can really share strategies and tips. But for starters, let's hear about your background. I'd love to know. Tell us about who you guys are, how you got into the space, and I guess how you founded Silicolabs in the first place. You're sitting next to each other, so I assume there's some relation here.
Yes, we are business partners and partners in life. And I guess maybe we'll start from the partners in life aspect. When Kyla and I first met, we actually spent the first, I think, 6 weeks of our relationship actually training for a triathlon, which we both had not done before. But Kyla had signed up, I think, a week before we met, and I was like, well, I just finished my first marathon, like, let's do this. And so Kyla didn't know how to bike and I didn't know how to swim, not very well, at least on either front. And so we just spent the first 6 weeks teaching each other and training with each other, and got across the finish line, went on to do half Ironman triathlons, and then in 2017, I decided to go back. I was working in finance at the time and not really enjoying that too much, and decided to go back to do a PhD, and then convinced Kyla to follow suit. That's kind of our origin story. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Kyla.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the startup now, we just like choosing things that are going to challenge ourselves. So we've now done, Ironman, half Ironmans together. Now we've done PhD together. Now we're doing a startup. So we're just really trying to one up each other every time for the extra challenge.
Yeah, I think the startup is definitely the height of challenge. It's been harder than I think anything that we've done before. And it's really great. We had to work shoulder to shoulder throughout COVID, and we still really like each other, still going strong and still pushing each other. So yeah, I think we can kind of make it through anything, which is really cool. So we don't have those maybe typical worries about working with your spouse and founding a company with your spouse. Those are kind of non-issues for us. But we could talk a little bit about the company as well. So how that started, which is kind of organically grew out of this story. When I started my PhD in 2017, I was in the psychology department at the University of Toronto, doing cognitive neuroscience research. And what I was really interested in was studying human behavior in real world environments. So a lot of the types of experiments and studies that we do in psychology is very abstract. We might give people surveys to do, or we might bring them into the lab and bombard them with images and videos and pretend that kind of emulates the real world experience, and strap them into a bunch of devices and try to get eye tracking data and brainwave data and all that kind of stuff. But it's very abstract from the real world. With emerging tech like virtual reality and augmented reality, we can now actually simulate the real world pretty closely, and put people into those simulations, and not only put them in, but actually capture the behavior as they're in those simulations. So the really cool part about XR technology, VR and augmented reality, is that it relies on a ton of sensors to actually create these simulations. So there's eye tracking sensors, there's hand tracking sensors, there's face tracking sensors, there's body capture sensors on these devices. They're necessary to create that experience. But as a researcher, those data points are things that we can actually capture. And so when we put somebody into one of these simulations, not only can we emulate the real world, but we can actually capture rich data that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do just by observing people doing things in the real world. So it's very exciting technology. And when I started trying to figure out how can we use this technology in research, I quickly realized that the folks that were actually utilizing the technology were very well-funded labs that were specialized in using this technology. They had built out full development teams, and as the PhD students or the researchers in those labs would really just come up with the concept for an experiment. And once that concept was kind of created and hashed out, they would just pass that off to a development team to actually develop that. And then it would go through iterations, much like if you wanted to go out into the world and build a training simulation or a custom kind of VR app, you would have to go to a development firm to do that. But I didn't have those resources. The lab that I was in was a fairly new lab, and I was still very adamant about figuring this out. So started designing, dabbling in game development engines, figuring out how to utilize those. And through that process, started designing tools that would speed up the process, speed up the amount of time that it would take to design and implement an experiment. In academia, you want to be creating tasks and running studies as fast as you can. There's a publish or perish kind of mentality, so you need to be getting papers out the door. And those tools that I started creating, people started hearing about them in the department and started utilizing them in other labs. And then word spread to other universities, Columbia University, folks there started using it. At that point, we really kind of realized oh, this is like a huge problem that people are facing in this space. So we founded Silicolabs to kind of address that problem and to, build out the infrastructure that's necessary for this next wave of immersive technologies and research.
You guys put yourselves through the gamut between the pandemic and between, a triathlon wasn't enough. We're going to get PhD. We're going to go really dive in deep. We're going to develop a whole infrastructure for companies and research labs and academia to leverage. That's going to be a game changer. So that is very cool. It speaks so much to, again, you guys as a pairing, but also you guys as a business. The hunger and the drive, it is evident. It's in the past. Now, I also love how you had mentioned too that training goes part and parcel with a lot of what needs to be done to get XR and to get these different kind of solutions out there. My past was in computer vision, and I think I was blown away to see that it's not just necessarily pointing a camera at something. I know computer vision is less of the beacon and sensor technology that you guys are working with in the AR space or in the VR space, but the amount of kind of human interaction in that infrastructure that you were describing that goes into actually getting these things off the ground, it is significant, and it is something that I think goes unspoken. So I imagine, again, lots of R&D, and that probably is a huge part of what you do. Could you tell me a little bit about what the process for developing it has been? I know you teed that up a little bit, but I'd love to know a little bit more about the timelines for actually building the product, the timelines for partnering with the partners that you guys do have. Could you speak to that a little bit more?
One thing that I've come to realize is that it just takes a long time and a lot of iterations to get things right. You really can't rush things when you're building something that is as big and dynamic and has as many features as what we've built is. It takes a lot of iteration. And so there's been a lot of times, for lack of a better phrase, where I've just had to kill the baby. You create, something that you have put so much time into, and you realize, I've learned that through this process, there is a better way of, doing this. And really the only way to do that better way is to kind of, almost start from scratch and start building again. And I think that with the framework we have now, I think that has happened maybe 4 times at this point, where it has been just a massive overhaul. And I mean, that comes along with, creating something innovative, but also as a founder, you kind of have to learn everything. And it takes a long time, to learn how to, use a game development engine, to code in that game development engine, to starting to create user interface with, graphics and stuff. So like learning Adobe Illustrator to create buttons. And, these are all things that, take a really long time and take a long time to develop personally those skills. And I think, that's one thing as a founder, you really have to be like aware of is like things are going to take a long time and you have to be patient. And we push really hard. And I think sometimes it just, you're pushing really hard and you're expecting certain outcomes by certain times. But those things typically, I don't know, in our experience just don't happen, and things take a lot longer than you expect them to take. So I think more generally on the R&D front is just like the patience of like, working through and iterating on things so that when you do end up, going to your first customer, that you have something that is like well tested. And on that front, I think maybe Kyla, you could talk a little bit about how we've approached, rolling out the product so far.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've really built the software kind of in collaboration with our users. So I would say that Benjamin was the first beta tester of our software.
Yeah.
We have experienced the problems that we're trying to address firsthand. It's been really exciting for me. So I have a bit more of a healthcare background. I'm actually a physical therapist. I practiced clinically for 9 years. And I'm also finishing up my PhD in rehab sciences at U of T. So I've got some of the clinical and the research background. And so although the idea for the software really came out of Benjamin's research and area, we've realized there's massive applications in my field as well. So that's been really cool. And we've been able to include some rehab scientists as some of our beta testers. So for our beta testing, we've done 2 rounds so far, and we've really tried to test out different use cases to identify what our customers really need from the software and then built it out from there. So I would say, the 2 rounds of beta testing has happened over the past year or so, and the software today compared to what it was a year ago is pretty incredible. Like we've made some amazing strides. So yeah, it's been neat to see it grow.
Yeah, it's been fun. Yeah.
That is so cool. And I think that point you made earlier, Benjamin, too, about killing the baby and how sometimes it happens 4 times and you're going through the process. Founders will be apprehensive when they're precious about something to kill the baby, to move on, to iterate on it. It's not just making an MVP for a lot of founders. It is actually like putting their heart and soul into something. And they don't realize that, hey, maybe they got ahead of themselves before they found that customer fit. Maybe they weren't beta testing with customers like you guys have been, which I think is a recurring lesson that we've learned and that we've had shared with founders who've been on the show recently as well. It's like partner with those customers while you're building it to really know the solution and to really zero in on what you can deliver and then get there together, because then those customers are going to be your biggest advocate down the line. I mean, you're building a use case, I'm thinking in my marketing brain, on the go while it's happening, which will be extremely valuable in the long run. Now, talking about those use cases, could you guys tell me a little bit about some of the most exciting use cases you've worked on so far, or the ones closest to your heart?
Like one of the coolest use cases, I think, like right at the very start was we had a lab from the University of Cambridge in the UK reach out to us, and they were looking for a solution to use the Microsoft HoloLens, which is a augmented reality device. So it has clear kind of a pass through on the front where you can embed kind of digital objects into the real world space and you can interact with those objects. But they wanted to take, designing those experiences a step further with mobile EEG. So basically, being able to capture brainwaves as somebody is in this real world, environment experiencing something. And so there was huge challenges there in order to be able to be untethered to create these experiences. And it wasn't just doing it in a stationary environment. They wanted to have folks be able to traverse the Cambridge University campus and encounter these digital experiences. And so being able to not only, create those experiences, but also capture the brainwave data, but sync all of that data to a millisecond timing, because that's what's required when you're doing, what we call event-related analysis on brainwaves. Brainwave data is very fast. Things happen in the brain very quickly, and you have to pick up on the minutia of that. So you need to have very precise timing. So that was a project that it was our first like augmented reality kind of testing of the software. Typically, we were doing desktop and VR stuff. So that was really cool. It's also, I think, one of the first studies that has actually combined those two technologies. And I think it was really not only validating for our software, but like it was like just a kind of a window into the future of like what research is going to be or can be. And that was super, just like really exciting. And actually Alex Clark, who we were working with at Cambridge, has actually come on to our advisory board. So he was very happy with how they could use the software to create these types of experiences. I think that's one that I like most. I'll maybe ask Kyla hers.
Yeah, it's funny, the story about Alex joining our advisory board, because the same thing happened with our other advisor, Blake Richards. So Blake is a core faculty member at Mila. He's also a professor at McGill, and really sits at kind of the intersection of neuroscience and AI. And Blake had a meeting with us and said, I have this idea for a project. It's kind of out there. I don't know how long it's going to take to create. I think he really thought it was going to be months, and Benjamin created it in what?
Yeah, I think in like 2 hours. I think Blake collaborates with some like folks at Google DeepMind, and we know that even these large companies have these big development teams, and so when other researchers even try to replicate what they've done at these companies, it's almost it's very difficult and oftentimes just impossible to do that. And so getting access to any of those types of like AI training environments, especially in the 3D space that Google has created, is very difficult. Because they put a lot of money into it. They've sunk a lot of money, and it's proprietary, and it's and so we wanted to just emulate one of those tasks. And I thought, I was talking with Blake, I'm like, I think I could whip this up pretty quickly. We got off the meeting, and I think with like by the end of that afternoon, I had like the task kind of replicated in our software, and which was published a published paper, I think, like maybe 6 months later. So it was really, really validating. That was a really cool use case.
Yeah, we really value our partnerships with Mila. We're working with leading scientists there, and it's so cool to be at the cutting edge of AI. It's just, I didn't expect this 4 years ago, but it's really neat.
Yeah, I think Mila has been awesome. Just to piggyback on that, we actually just got a matching grant with them. So with Mila, we're going to be investing $250K in building out our AI platform. And let me take a little bit of a detour here and talk a little bit just about large language models that have been like the focus of a lot of conversation lately. Often when we think about these large language models and how cool it is that we can interact with a model that is can fool us that it could be human, we think about the really intense development of just the AI model. But really, what is the key piece of that is having the data to actually be able to train that model. So there's actually like open source large language models that you can train if you have the data. But I think OpenAI, I think they had an estimate that it cost them like $60 million to train that, and I'm sure they had to train the model several times. So hugely cost prohibitive to get all this data and to train. And you can't ask OpenAI to grab you a coffee. It's a text-based algorithm, and so we've been thinking like, how do we create the next generation of artificial intelligence? How do we have artificial intelligence that transcends our screen, or that is what we refer to as like embodied artificial intelligence? So artificial intelligence that can actually control things, have an avatar, a digital avatar, or be a robotic system that is controlled. And for creating human-like artificial intelligence, whether it's a chatbot or it's a robot or if it's an avatar, the key piece that you need is that human data. And right now, those chatbots were possible because we have the internet. But when you start venturing into embodied AI, there's no data repository of human behavioral data, of people interacting with the real world. Like, we have to figure out a way of how do we build that data repository. And so while we're creating this content creation platform for folks that create these experiences that both humans and AI can, interact with, we're also building a platform for collecting, the key ingredient to this next generation of artificial intelligence, which is super, really, really super exciting. And, it's why, we have such a strong connection with Mila now and are working with, some really awesome folks over at Mila to actually bring this to life, which is really exciting. Yeah.
I just came back from SaaStr last week, and I've been at a lot of events, and I've seen a lot of companies talking about AI and LLM. Embodied AI. I've heard you say it, and I haven't heard others say it necessarily the way you said it. So it is so exciting that what you're offering as a solution is also helping build the future, helping build what you're going to be doing going forward. I think folks are kind of stuck in the generative AI rut at the moment and not really looking forward. They're still trying to figure out what we're doing with the technology on the table, with the open AI here. You guys are thinking forward, and I think also thinking very practically without making it a moonshot. You're thinking about what the actual applications will be in a practical sense going forward, and you're building that, which is so cool. And Kyla, I loved you talking about the advisory board and just having the members of your advisory board. Very rarely do you hear a startup in this phase necessarily leveraging so many partnerships to really build the product as you go. I know we're close to time, so I'm going to throw in a couple more questions real quick, but I'd love to know, what are the plans for the future? I know you did talk about that a little bit with the embodied AI conversation. And also, what's your take on the current state of startups? It's choppy waters for some businesses out there, and I think I alluded to how so many folks are calling themselves members of the generative AI kind of horde right now. What would be some advice you'd give for them and also your plans?
I mean, I think AI is really hot right now, right? I think if you say you're an AI startup, there's a lot of attention, but I think there's sometimes some skepticism too. And I think it's just to actually have something that is worthwhile, like that there's some substance to it. I think we're able to demo our software for our customers and potential customers, and they see the value right away. We're not kind of, waving the AI card and being like, yeah, we're an AI startup. We have something. And so I think people really appreciate that, and that we can show it is great too.
Yeah, I think there's like kind of two ends of the spectrum where like you can go out and you can pitch this big idea that maybe you don't have, a lot of it built, but it's very exciting. And then there's the other end where you spend a lot of time kind of like in R&D mode, but it's difficult to bootstrap a company. And I think we're at the very like far end of that, like bootstrapping, and where we have the strongest footing is in the academic space right now. We have some really exciting things going on in the enterprise space and in market research and in cognitive type assessments and things like that. And it's been difficult on the kind of bringing people in, because when you go to investors and you start saying, oh, I'm a PhD student and we're selling to academics, their eyes kind of like glaze over. It's not like a giant market for them. And I think like that's okay. Like I think like we need the academic market to push the enterprise on these new technologies. We need them to figure out, how to utilize these new technologies. So it serves a very definitive purpose, but it's also just like really pushed us to, kind of do as much as we can, like just bootstrapping. And I think we've learned a ton. And, especially in the investment climate that has been for the last, year, it's really difficult to go and pitch companies right now. So I think like, you have to be kind of closer to the end of the spectrum where you're doing a lot of the work yourself and not trying to pitch these big ideas. And I think that that's just where things are at right now. That's what investors seem to be looking at. What is the product that you have? What traction do you have? Where is that traction? Those are all key factors. And just be prepared to slog, be prepared to not have the ability to go and just pitch an idea and get funding to build it. Like, get your hands dirty and, figure it out and learn things. I think that's the biggest thing, is the learner mentality. Like you just have to, there's nobody else to do anything. It's just you. It's like, you got to figure it out. You don't have a graphic designer. You don't have a website designer. Like, guess what? You're now a graphic designer. You are now a website designer. Like, that's just what being a startup founder is. And, don't expect, the right person to come in and solve any problems. Like you have to you're the one solving them. You're the person.
That is or starting a podcast. You're doing it all yourself. Yeah. I think that's a beautiful note to share with founders and listeners. Have that learner mentality. And investors are going to look at people who they know are going to actually roll up their sleeves and work on it, especially right now. It's not just about the pitch. It's about demonstrating you're going to do the work. Guys, I cannot thank you enough. Kyla, Benjamin, this was a pleasure. I hope to chat again soon, and thank you again for being on the show.